On the day of our engagement, the junior schoolmate who had chased my boyfriend for 2 years attempted suicide. My boyfriend left me and rushed to the hospital and didn't come back all night. When the 22nd call I made was finally answered, his impatient voice came from the other side. "Tracy, can't you be a bit more sensible? My family and Gavin's have been friends for generations. We are neighbors and childhood sweethearts. We went to school and back home together since we were little and even entered the same university. During the winter vacation of our freshman year, Gavin confessed to me on New Year's Eve. He said he had finally waited for this day and begged me to be with him, promising that he would be good to me for a lifetime. All our friends in the circle cheered and jeered. I cried like a fool and finally told him that I had also been waiting for this day. Then I rushed into his arms and kissed him hard. Our parents had long had a tacit understanding, and were also happy about our relationship. Things changed in our sophomore year. At the freshman orientation meeting, Gavin, as an outstanding sophomore senior, gave a speech on the stage. Gavin is the school hunk and his appearance needs no mention. As soon as he stepped on the stage, many girls started whispering. I watched helplessly from the side and was about to wait for him outside. I sat outside for a while, and two boys came up to me and said they wanted my contact information. Coincidentally, Gavin is the school hunk and I am the school belle. I still have confidence in my appearance. She has a boyfriend. Gavin's voice came from behind. The faces of the two boys turned red at once, and they repeatedly apologized to us and then left. Gavin's face didn't look good. I smiled and went forward to hold his arm. "Well, what shall we have for dinner?" "It's on me." Gavin pinched my chin. "Shall I hide you? Lock you at home and not let you go out? Imprisonment? No, that's too much." Gavin was amused by me and then kissed me hard on the face as if to assert his sovereignty. I pushed him away and happened to see a girl behind him. The girl looked at us in shock, still holding a piece of paper in her hand. She seemed extremely flustered as if she was scared by us. Gavin followed my gaze but ignored her and just took my hand and left. I saw that girl again at the student union recruitment. The reason I remembered her was that someone said she looked a bit like me. Yes, it was Gavin who said that. After he pulled me away that day, he also looked back and said, "That girl looks a bit like you, but not as beautiful as you." At the recruitment meeting, my roommate and best friend also said that the short-haired girl's eyes were a bit like mine, and there was also a mole of tears at the corner of her right eye. As she said that, she also shook her head and sighed, saying that girls with moles of tears usually have an unlucky love life, and she didn't know if it was accurate. After that, she looked at me and then overturned what she had said before, saying that just looking at me, she knew that this statement was not accurate. In the second semester of our junior year, Gavin insisted on holding a birthday party. Because I had been busy preparing for the postgraduate entrance examination before, I basically rarely participated in any activities. This time Gavin specially invited his old classmates in the same city in order to let me relax. But on the day of the birthday party, Gavin brought someone. My best friend and I looked at each other and we both recognized that this was the girl they said had eyes like mine. Gavin introduced that this was his junior schoolmate, named Lily. They met in a mountaineering activity. Gavin likes outdoor sports and Lily also likes them. They got familiar with each other through occasional encounters. My best friend raised her eyebrows unhappily. "Lily? What a good name." Lily's face stiffened, and she didn't say anything. Gavin's face suddenly turned bad. He had always disliked my best friend and thought she was too indiscreet. Everyone didn't have a very happy meal. I didn't say much and Gavin kept picking up food for me, and even brought in ginger that I didn't like several times. In the past, he was always very careful to pick it out for me, but today it was obvious that he was absent-minded. When sending me back to the dormitory, Gavin asked me if I was unhappy. I just nodded and said that he shouldn't have shown his dissatisfaction to my best friend, and that the person without a sense of propriety was clearly not her. Gavin held my hand and said that he actually didn't invite Lily. It was Lily who heard him on the phone and then knew about it and also sent him a gift. He couldn't refuse a little girl, and in order to return the favor, he brought her to the birthday party. I looked at Gavin with a faint expression. I couldn't believe he believed such a trick. As he said that, Gavin took out a knot keychain and said that this was what Lily gave, and she also wished that the two of us would be united forever. Gavin said he didn't want it at first, but when he heard that it was a blessing for the two of us, he accepted it. Gavin's eyes were sincere, and he also promised to apologize to my best friend. He said that as long as I wasn't angry, he could do whatever I wanted. I didn't have many requirements. I just asked him to draw a clear line from Lily, and that they should have a sense of propriety. But even so, rumors still spread. First, there was a post on the school internet saying that Lily was the third party and the ones being intervened were me and Gavin. Gavin and I were a famous model couple in the school, so it caused a big stir. Immediately after that, it was also revealed that they used couple items. Gavin's keychain and Lily's mobile phone chain were two identical knot keychains. Gavin and I were childhood sweethearts, and basically everyone in the school knew. So for a while, the spearhead of public opinion all pointed at Lily. I glanced at the comments and there were all kinds of scolding. My best friend also looked at me seriously and told me not to let my guard down, and that it was the right thing to quickly suppress that Lily. I was speechless. It's not a matter of whether I suppress her or not. It depends on Gavin. Since the incident happened, I had always remained silent and focused only on preparing for the exam. There are plenty of love and men, but youth is only a few years. I know what's important. Finally, having fulfilled land fashion, Lily came to me first. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She said that her life and study had been affected, and begged me to help her clarify that she really didn't do anything. I rubbed my temples irritably, and told her that I didn't have the time. When I turned around to leave, I called another childhood friend. He is a computer major, and I asked him to do me a favor. My childhood friend was very fast and found out the IP address of the anonymous post that night. I found Gavin and told him that this was all directed and acted by Lily alone. But Gavin looked at me with complicated emotions. Tracy, you've fulfilled my obsessions. You checked her? Shouldn't I check? Then what are you going to do? Call the police? Lily just likes me and she is just a little girl and didn't think too much, so she did something wrong. I was stunned. The Gavin in front of me made me a bit incomprehensible. Tracy. Anyway, Kevin fulfilled land session. This has no impact on you, but it's her who is hurt. Let's just let this matter pass and don't pursue it anymore. Okay? I stared at Gavin for a while and finally smiled. Okay. If you think it can pass, then let it pass. Gavin was relieved and immediately wanted to hug me, but I stepped back to avoid him. Gavin. It's not that the weak are always right. This is a matter of principle and character. It can pass for you but not for me. Gavin was a bit annoyed. And what do you say? I frowned. You handle it yourself. If you can't handle such a small matter well, then we break up. We had a cold war for a whole semester. However, I also heard that Gavin and Lily did draw a clear line, and Lily also rented a house outside the school and basically didn't come back when there were no classes. This matter gradually subsided with time, but it seemed that something between Gavin and me was slowly changing. On the day I was admitted to graduate school, my mother called me and asked me to go home. I went downstairs and Gavin was waiting for me downstairs. I didn't say a word on the way home. Gavin was driving and his eyes looked at me from time to time. When I got home, it turned out that our two families planned to arrange our engagement. Gavin actually took the postgraduate entrance examination this year, but he failed. Originally his grades had always been better than mine. I don't know if something had affected him, and now he didn't get admitted to graduate school. My parents comforted him and said it was okay and he could take the exam again next year. And Gavin's parents had been holding my hand and said that graduate school was not urgent, but marrying a daughter-in-law was very urgent. After dinner, I was alone in the yard in a daze. Gavin put a coat on me and said it was cold and not to catch a cold. I turned around and looked at him. Do you really want to get engaged? Of course. Gavin, Lima, we are not young anymore. We should think about the consequences when we do things, and we should also be responsible. Tracy. From childhood to adulthood, I never thought of marrying anyone else, and I only recognize you in this life. But although he said nice words, he still disappointed me. On the day of our engagement, Gavin received a phone call. He said that Lily had cut her wrists and was being rescued in the hospital. I held him and said that it was okay for the doctors to rescue Lily, but I couldn't do without him for my engagement. Gavin stared at me for a while and said that I should be good, and he would just go and have a look and come back immediately if there was nothing wrong. In this way, Gavin left me and all the guests and left. This scene was very much like the drama I liked most. Once I was still in Gavin's arms complaining about that bride, and said that the one who is not loved is the third party. At that time, Gavin would smile and kiss the corner of my eye, and his voice was low and hoarse, and he asked me to marry him quickly. But now I realized that I was not the heroine. It took me nearly an hour to calm myself down. Although my heart was still aching, I still insisted on politely seeing off the guests and explained to them that Gavin had something very important in the laboratory, and if he missed it, it would affect his future. I don't know if others would believe it, but I myself didn't believe it. Finally, having fulfilled, my best friend helped me send both parents home, and I was alone sitting in the empty banquet hall and finally burst into tears. For so long, the anger and irritability that had been suppressed in my heart finally burst out. Recalling the past between me and Gavin, I laughed and cried and then cried and laughed. In the evening, I drove alone to the top of the mountain where Gavin and I often went to watch the sunrise. I called him, and without exception, all the calls were hung up by him. I laughed at myself. Counting from the time we were born, it has been 22 years now. And every time he hung up my call, I erased 1 year of affection in my heart. In this way, having fulfilled my obsession, until the 22nd call was answered by him. The sun also broke free from the horizon and jumped out of the mountain top. It's already in a mess here. Tracy. Can't you be quiet and sensible? This was the first time Gavin had spoken to me like this. To be honest, I was a bit surprised and unaccustomed. But I still adjusted my mood and then said, Gavin, let's break up. I've mentioned breaking up twice. The first time was a warning, and this time it's a notice. I hung up the phone before Gavin could say anything. Then went home to pack my things. Ready to start a new life. In fact, I'm a relatively independent girl. When I was with Gavin, I basically didn't need his help. So after leaving him, apart from feeling very sad, I didn't find it hard to get used to other things. In the morning, I still get up early to have breakfast by myself as usual. I have lunch and dinner with my best friend. I've put all my energy into my studies. My grades are among the best. And my tutor praises me constantly. My best friend often rubs my face with regret, saying, "Last month you still had a chubby face. How come you have an oval face in just 1 month?" In fact, no matter how well I pretend during the day, I still feel sad at night. I often hide under the covers and cry, usually falling asleep while crying. Gavin came to look for me several times, but I didn't see him. He also sent me messages every day, but I didn't reply. I really wanted to block him, but my finger hovered above the screen, and I just couldn't bear to do it. Later, once he blocked me in the cafeteria and said that he had made things clear on the day Lily was discharged from the hospital. He said that the person he liked was me, and the woman he would marry in the future could only be me. I stared fixedly at Gavin and asked him what he would do if Lily tried to commit suicide again. Gavin was speechless. I told him that what I've always wanted was never a promise or a guarantee, but that when I and another girl were on the two ends of the balance, teetering, he would choose me without hesitation. Gavin moved his lips, and then said in a very low voice, "If she wants to die, I can't just ignore her." I sneered. "Then, what if both of us were going to die? Whom would you save?" "Of course it's you." "To be honest," Gavin answered with great determination, "and I believe that if I were also in the hospital being rescued, Gavin would definitely choose me firmly." "What a pity." I stood up and said, "Gavin, let out a mo sigh. My love and my husband shouldn't be obtained through life-threatening means." Perhaps Gavin didn't know that on the day of the engagement, when he chose to leave, I had already fallen off the balance, covered in bruises. After that day, I broke up with Gavin completely. He knew my temper and didn't pester me. Instead, he studied even harder to prepare for the second exam, while I was also constantly busy with my studies. I still haven't blocked him. Before, I couldn't bear to do it, and now I've let it go and think it's unnecessary. It's late autumn. There is a path in the school with maple trees on both sides. Every season at this time, Gavin would pull me to take a slow walk on the path. He said that after we got married, we would come here every year. And later we would come with our children. When we were old, we would come here supporting each other. But neither of us waited until that time. I was sitting alone under the maple tree. The late autumn sees and always makes people feel especially sad. In the evening, my best friend found me and said that it was her birthday today and asked me to accompany her to have a meal. Damn it. I actually forgot about this. My best friend and I have known each other since childhood. She is also my uncle's neighbor. When I was in primary school, my parents were often not at home, so they sent me to my uncle's house. Several children played together. My best friend has a brother, who is the same age as my uncle's cousin. At that time, detective dramas were popular. We often gathered around to watch them. When each case was solved, we were all excited and determined to study law well in the future. Later, on the day of the freshman registration in college, my best friend and I met again in the dormitory. I then learned that my cousin was an outstanding student in the law major, and so was her brother. Recalling the things from childhood, I suddenly realized that there were not only Gavin in my life, I also had friends and relatives, as well as the dreams and goals I had when I was young. Before I knew it, I had been taken to the restaurant by my best friend. I thought it would just be the two of us today. But as soon as we entered the door, we were attracted by the cheering sound in the private room. I turned my head subconsciously, and my mind went buzz. The door of the private room was half open. And at this moment, what I saw was Gavin and Lily kissing. What the hell? Are they shameless? My best friend was filled with anger. She picked up a wine bottle from the next table and was about to rush forward. I quickly hugged her and said, "Jocelyn, don't be impulsive." It wasn't that I was kind-hearted, but because we were both law students. If we got a stain on our records because of a fight, it would affect our future careers. But my best friend is straightforward and can't stand seeing me being wronged. A noise we made here alerted the people in the private room. Gavin saw me at a glance. He pushed Lily away in a panic and said, "Tracy?" He ran towards me, afraid that my best friend would really hit him with the wine bottle. I quickly shouted, "Stay away." But my best friend was furious. She raised the wine bottle towards Gavin and said, "You scumbag and that bitch. Today, even if I get detained, I will get justice for Tracy. Jocelyn, it's all in the past. It's not worth it for such people." "What do you mean by such people?" Just as I finished speaking, Lily also walked out of the private room. Her lips were still a little swollen, and she looked at me provocatively. "Senior, your words are so harsh. Gavin and I are dating openly." My best friend cursed. "Openly? You're a mistress. Don't you know what despicable means you used?" A flash of anger crossed Lily's face, but she quickly smiled and looked at my best friend. "Dear senior, you've disliked me before. What do you still want to hit me? But aren't you studying law? If you hit me, aren't you afraid that I'll sue you?" "Shut up," I shouted, then looked at Gavin and said, "Why don't you take her away?" Hearing my voice, Gavin finally came to his senses and went to call Lily. But Lily seemed determined to enrage my best friend. She shook off Gavin's hand and, with a very annoying look on her face, pointed to the top of her head towards my best friend and said, "Hit me here. Don't be polite." "But senior, why can't you understand me? I heard that senior has been chasing after a certain senior for many years. It's a pity that the person didn't like you even after you tried so hard. TSK. Senior, aren't you being cheap?" Originally, having fulfilled I wanted to calm things down. But seeing my best friend being wronged, I couldn't bear it anymore. "Shut your mouth," I cursed. And then, let out a low sigh. Before anyone could react, I snatched the wine bottle from my best friend and threw it directly at Lily. There was a dull thud. It was Gavin who blocked in front of Lily. The wine bottle hit his shoulder and also hit my heart. At that moment, I truly felt what it meant to be heartbroken. Finally, hadn't fulfilled my sigh. Between the two of us, he still chose Lily. Lily was shocked for a moment. then quickly shouted to the companions behind her to call the police. Gavin shook off Lily. Then turned around and shouted, "I'd like to see who the hell dares to call the police?" After shouting, he looked at me and said, "Tracy, don't be afraid. I won't let them call the police." After that, he wanted to come over and hold my hand. But I avoided him. I pointed the wine bottle at Lily and said, "Bitch. I'm not afraid of you calling the police. But if you dare to scold Jocelyn again, do you believe I'll make you pay?" Lily was also frightened by me. After all, she didn't expect me to really take action. My best friend was also stunned. She just held my hand. And now it was her turn to persuade me not to be impulsive. My anger didn't subside. I don't care if I don't become a lawyer. I have hands and feet. And I can earn a living doing anything. Unlike some people, all they can do is seduce men with despicable means. What else can they do? My best friend was so touched that she hugged me and said that she could also support me. Support me for a lifetime. After this happened, my best friend and I didn't plan to eat here anymore. We were about to leave. But Gavin seemed possessed. He ignored Lily, who was crying and sobbing, and just grabbed my wrist, asking me to listen to his explanation. At this stalemate, a big hand with distinct joints grabbed Gavin. "Brother, it's time to let go." I was stunned. I looked up at the person and heard my best friend shout "brother" beside me. My best friend's older brother, Flynn, has been the standard child of someone else's family since childhood. He has good grades, a good appearance, a good personality, and a good family background. After not seeing him for many years, he has grown from the sunny boy in my impression into a mature man. He pulled Gavin's hand away and smiled at me. "Tracy. Long time no see." I was stunned for a moment. Then quickly replied, "Flynn. Long time no see." This was the address we used when we played house as children. At that time, I played the role of a lawyer. And he was the client who came for help. In the end, my best friend hugged me while crying. She said that I was so good. So why did Gavin and Lily treat me so badly? The two of us hugged each other. And for the first time, I cried out loud as if to release all my emotions. Yeah. Why did they do this to me? The next day, when I went to see the tutor, my eyes were as swollen as a goldfish's. I thought there was no one else around, so I didn't care about my appearance at all. But when I pushed open the door of the office, I really wanted to find a hole to crawl into. Because not only was the tutor there, but Flynn was also there. And then I realized that he had clearly sent a message saying, "See you tomorrow" yesterday. But at that time, I was only focused on chatting with my best friend and completely forgot about it. Good heavens! Could there be anything more embarrassing than this? Just in time. "Tracy is here." "Flynn. You were just saying that you were short-handed, right? Let Tracy be your assistant." I was stunned. Before my brain could react, Flynn nodded with a smile and said, "I couldn't ask for more. But I don't know if Tracy would condescend." It turned out that there were too many cases in the law firm recently, and some of them were quite tricky. Flynn came to discuss with the tutor if there were any suitable juniors or seniors that he could recruit to the law firm. And I, as the tutor's favorite student in the new class, was naturally the first choice. Flynn was very efficient. In the afternoon, he brought me a large stack of materials. Since going to the law firm still required going through some procedures with the school, I could familiarize myself with the materials first. He seemed to have just come from the law firm and he hadn't changed his clothes yet. He was wearing a navy blue shirt, black trousers, and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses on his nose. Different from the casual clothes he wore when we had dinner the day before, and also different from the semi-mature style he had in the morning. I don't know why, but when I saw Flynn like this, the word "to gentleman with a corrupt heart" suddenly popped into my mind. My heart skipped a beat. How could this man switch between different styles seamlessly? I stood not far away and watched him smile and decline to female students who asked for his WeChat. His tone was gentle, but his attitude was distant. He refused simply by saying that he already had a girlfriend and was about to get married. A touch of emotion crossed my mind. Look, as long as you want to refuse, you won't give others a chance to get close to you. When there was no one else around, I then walked over with a smile and said, "Flynn is still as charming as ever." He gently tapped my forehead, then gave me the materials and said, "There are quite a lot. You can look at them first. If you don't understand anything, feel free to ask me." He was very busy. As soon as he delivered the things, he was in a hurry to leave. But just as he was about to turn around and leave, he stopped and turned back to say, "I'm available 24 hours. I smiled and said, "Then you'd better be prepared. It's possible that I'll call you in the middle of the night." I couldn't ask for more. Damn bad luck. But who can I blame? Aren't all the blisters on my feet caused by my own walking? I was sitting there in a daze when my best friend suddenly let out a scream. I was startled. My best friend put her phone in front of me and said, "Is this woman Lily?" The photo was a bit blurry, but it was still easy to tell who it was at a glance. But my attention wasn't on Lily. It was on the man sitting opposite Lily. Was that Flynn? In the following hour, my best friend grilled Flynn nonstop and also sent greetings to Gavin and Lily's ancestors. Her words were filled with expletives, like sending a telegram in rapid succession. Finally, Tedinfo fell wabsai. When she was exhausted from scolding and hung up the phone, I poured her a glass of water. I thought she must be extremely thirsty. But before I could say a word, she suddenly stood up and wanted to take me out. "It's getting dark soon. Where are we going?" "To find my brother." "Are you crazy? Your brother is working overtime. He's busy with important things." My best friend finally calmed down. I let out a soft sigh, having fulfilled land sigh. Then pulled my best friend back to sit down and told her that Flynn wasn't like Gavin and wouldn't do anything out of line. Besides, Flynn had already explained that Lily was a client of another lawyer in the law firm. He didn't have much impression of her at first. And when she stopped him at the door today, they just exchanged a greeting. After my persuasion, my best friend finally stopped making trouble with Flynn. At 1:30 in the morning, I received a message from Flynn asking if I was asleep, since I usually go to bed late. I replied immediately. The next second, his phone call came in. I hid under the covers and spoke in a low voice. And Flynn on the other end also lowered his voice. I couldn't help laughing and said he could speak louder. Flynn chuckled softly and then explained to me what happened when he met Lily today. He said he really didn't know Lily. And when she greeted him at the door, he just stopped out of reflex. He didn't expect that in just a moment. He was photographed. I felt a bit conflicted yet touched. When it came to similar situations, Gavin would only tell me that I was overthinking. I wanted to tell Flynn that he actually didn't need to explain this to me because I had no right to be jealous. Finally Flynn broke the ice. "By the way, I'm going back to school tomorrow morning. What do you want for breakfast?" Although the topic shift was a bit abrupt, I was still moved that he could sense my awkwardness. Compared with Gavin, he never seemed to have considered me so carefully. In his eyes I was always independent and tough, but that wasn't a reason for him to not be attentive to me. I thought this matter was over. But for some reason, since that day, Flynn started to frequently appear downstairs of my dormitory. Flynn and I were sitting in the back seat. He was closing his eyes to rest, and I didn't have the heart to disturb him. Suddenly, having fulfilled my obsession, my hand felt warm as Flynn held it. I opened my eyes to look at him. He still had his eyes closed, but his grip on my hand tightened. We didn't talk during the whole journey until we arrived at the airport. Then, taking advantage of the crowded people, he pulled me to his side. "Tracy, I have something to tell you when I come back." His eyes were so passionate that my heart started pounding. I could only blush and nod subconsciously. Then, come back early. In the evening, my best friend and I went to watch a movie, but neither of us was in high spirits. When the movie ended, my best friend suddenly showed me Flynn's WeChat moments with excitement. He posted a photo of a movie ticket with the caption, "Watching a movie with my Tracy in spirit." My cousin commented, "You're clearly watching the movie with me. But you're thinking about my sister in your heart." I smiled. He was really putting his heart into loving someone. In fact, it's easy to tell the difference between not being sincere and going all out. For example, Gavin had a lot of time to be with me. But when he was with me, he still paid attention to others. Another example is Flynn. He was extremely busy, but he tried his best every second to make me happy. The relationship between Flynn and me gradually got closer without us realizing it. A good relationship really can nourish a person. Looking back at the days when I just broke up with Gavin, I was like a completely different person from now. However, the best news today was that Flynn said his trip was coming to an end. He estimated that he would be back in 3 or 5 days, and could even catch up with my birthday. I was on the way back to the dormitory, talking to Flynn on the phone. But when I saw Gavin standing downstairs of the dormitory, the smile on my face froze instantly. "Tracy, can we talk?" I ignored him and tried to walk around him, but Gavin grabbed me. "There's really nothing between me and Lily. What you saw that day was just that I was drunk. Her eyes always reminded me of yours. And with the alcohol taking effect, Gavin. Don't say she looks like me anymore. It makes me sick. Tracy, don't treat me like this. I really know I was wrong. Tracy, can you give me a chance? Let's start over." "Sure," I agreed firmly. A look of surprise flashed across Gavin's face. He stepped forward to hug me, but I dodged. "Gavin, let down a low sigh. If you can turn back time and make everything go back to before it all happened, then I'll forgive you." Maybe my expression was too cold. Gavin looked sad. "Tracy, you've fallen in love with Flynn, haven't you?" During this period, there have been many rumors about Flynn and me in school. Everyone thought we were together. Because of the incident of Gavin betraying me before, everyone had a favorable impression of me, thinking that I had finally come through hard times, and they were full of blessings. I didn't deliberately clarify anything. Seeing that I didn't respond, Gavin got angry. He grabbed my wrist and demanded harshly, "What exactly am I inferior to Flynn in?" I stared at him for a while. "You're inferior to him in every way." Gavin was stunned, seemingly not expecting me to say that. "Tracy, your words are so heartless." "Really? Is it more heartless than what you did? Compared to you flirting with others while we were still together? Compared to you leaving me alone at the engagement banquet? Compared to you passionately kissing someone else while still saying that I'm the one in your heart? I think you're even more heartless." When I mentioned the engagement banquet, Gavin closed his eyes in pain. Perhaps this was the thing he least wanted to mention. I remember during that time Gavin explained to me, more than once, that Lily was too dependent on him, while I was very independent. He found the feeling of being admired and relied on in Lily. But not only did I not rely on him, I was even better than him in many things. I thought it was extremely ridiculous. Could my progress and efforts be the reason for his cheating? I didn't want to entangle with him anymore. So I turned around and went upstairs. Gavin pulled me. "Tracy, is Flynn really that good? Can he outweigh our more than 20-year relationship?" I didn't turn back, but replied loudly, "Gavin, Flynn is just that good. Have you ever thought that the reason you're not relied on and admired by me is that you're too weak? Why doesn't Flynn think so? Because he's confident and powerful. So he deserves it." After saying this, I entered the dormitory building. But when I picked up my phone, I suddenly realized the person on the other end of the phone hadn't hung up. I tentatively put the phone to my ear. "Tracy, I booked a flight for tomorrow morning. I want to see you right away." Early the next morning, before my best friend woke up, I quietly got up. Calculating the time, Flynn should be arriving soon. I took several deep breaths, and my hand holding the makeup brush was shaking. It was strange. It wasn't the first time we met. So why was I so nervous? A WeChat message popped up, "I'll be at school in half an hour." I was stunned. Why was he so fast? There was no time to put on makeup. I quickly tidied myself up and rushed downstairs, only to see Lily. A wave of annoyance hit me. I planned to stay away from her. But unexpectedly, Lily called out to me. "Tracy, are you satisfied now? You've messed up my life. Gavin doesn't want me. Even if I try to be like you. Even when he's drunk. He can tell at a glance that I'm not you. He told me to stay away, saying that if you saw me, you'd be sad. Tracy, you clearly don't want him anymore. But he still only has you in his heart. He even started pushing me away to beg for your forgiveness. Now you two are in true love. So what am I? This is between you and him. It has nothing to do with me." Bah. Lily spat and then looked at me with a sneer. Tracy. Don't think that just because you act so high and mighty. No one knows. You're also relying on men to find your sense of worth. Otherwise, why are you clinging to Flynn? You're the same as me. Lily's eyes were red and her emotions were a bit agitated. I remembered something Flynn told me before. Lily had consulted about the property issue regarding extramarital affairs in the law firm. If his judgment was correct, Lily should have been deceived by a married man. After the relationship turned from love to a nurturing relationship, she was discovered by the legal wife and was wronged. This matter somehow spread later. She had struggled in this relationship before. Even if she finally compromised, she was still a half-victim. So she somehow won some sympathy. But later she destroyed the relationship between me and Gavin, which was knowingly being a third party. So once this matter came out, she became infamous in school. She thought that her current situation was all because of me. So she was more hostile towards me. I just thought she was stimulated. I'd better stay away from someone with such a wrong set of values. Otherwise, if something happened, I'd be the one at a loss. I glanced at the time. Flynn was about to arrive. I turned around and walked in the direction away from Lily. But suddenly there was an urgent sound of footsteps behind me. I subconsciously looked back and only had time to see a figure flash by. And Lily's voice exploded in my ears. Bitch, if you die, Gavin won't leave me. I have nothing now except him. So die. Tracy. In the nick of time, I was suddenly pulled into an embrace. With a clang, the fruit knife fell to the ground. And the blade was still stained with blood. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly pushed Flynn away. Where are you hurt? I saw a long gash on his arm. Which was shocking. I cried bitterly. But he held me tightly in his arms and comforted me despite the pain. As long as you're okay. When the police came to take Lily away, she looked at me with a nearly crazy expression. Why? Why do you have everything since you were born? Why does everyone protect you? Why? I looked at her coldly, because I respect and love myself. Lily was stunned. And then she let out a creepy laugh. Even when she was stuffed into the police car, she still looked at me with venomous eyes. Deliberately carrying a knife to attack someone, although not enough to be sentenced, would still leave a criminal record. And her college life was ruined. I didn't understand. She clearly had a bright future ahead, but she chose to ruin it herself. Flynn got injured because of me. So I've been taking care of him during his sick leave. We still haven't talked things through. But we have a tacit understanding with each other. On my birthday, we decided to have a small gathering at his place. My cousin and best friend were both there. I don't know why, but I always felt that the atmosphere between my cousin and best friend was a bit off. My best friend has a crush on my cousin. The senior that Lily scolded her for chasing after 4 years without success is my cousin. I've asked my cousin several times, and he always said he didn't have those feelings. Relationships need to be mutual. And my best friend let go of her feelings later. But somehow, I feel that recently my cousin seems to be very clingy to my best friend. For example, today I was standing on the balcony and saw my cousin Ryan to hug my best friend. She pushed him away, but he wasn't angry. In the end, my best friend gave in and was hugged tightly. In matters of the heart, Jocelyn is much braver than you. Flynn's voice came from behind me. He stood firmly behind me and gently wrapped me in his arms. He bent down, resting his chin on my neck, and his breath blew on my earlobe. Tracy, are you still not willing to be my girlfriend? It's not that I'm not willing. It's just that he got injured as soon as he came back. And until now there hasn't been a chance to talk about this. I wanted to explain, but he continued. But it doesn't matter. We can talk about love later. Let's just get married directly. Flynn's arms around me tight and even more. I don't want to wait anymore. Isn't it the same to fall in love after getting married? Tracy, if I wait any longer, I'm afraid you'll run away. I was amused by him and leaned against him gently. Well, it's not impossible. Hearing my words, Flynn's lips came down. He pecked at my neck gently. His voice hoarse and low. Let me introduce myself then. I'm Flynn. 28 years old. I have a clean record. No bad habits. And I've never had a girlfriend. There's only one first love in my heart since I was a child. Someone I'd cherished for many years. My heart skipped a beat. And my eyes felt a bit sour. I'm Tracy. 23 years old. I had a boyfriend before. But I'm innocent both physically and mentally. I want to marry the person behind me and spend the rest of my life with him. For having fulfilled many years. Gavin's side story, Tracy is still with Flynn. On the day I learned this news, I went to look for Tracy once. But I didn't dare to talk to her. I watched from afar as Flynn and she walked together. The smile on her face was something I had never seen before. In fact, I never really liked Lily. I just enjoyed that kind of ambiguity and the admiration of vulnerable women towards me. I know I hurt Tracy. And with her stubborn personality, she definitely won't forgive me. Perhaps noticing that I wasn't in a good state, my family arranged for me to go abroad to manage the branch company. During the year abroad, I missed Tracy all the time. If I hadn't been so muddle-headed back then, we might have been married by now. 1 year later, I learned about Tracy and Flynn's wedding news. And I returned to the country. I didn't receive an invitation. But I still went to the wedding venue. I left a gift at the reception area without leaving my name. The gift was a pair of wedding rings designed by Tracy's favorite designer. She once said that when we got married, she must wear this pair of rings. Unfortunately, having fulfilled I bought them. But no one cared about them anymore. I sat in the corner wearing a baseball cap, watching the bride throw the bouquet. Tracy didn't throw it. Instead, she solemnly handed the bouquet to Jocelyn. The two best friends hugged each other and cried with joy. This is the girl I like. She has always been so outstanding and kind. Until I saw the bride and groom kissing. I felt a dull pain in my heart and didn't dare to stay any longer. I secretly took a photo with my phone. My Tracy. She looks so beautiful in a wedding dress. I couldn't help but think of the day Tracy and I got engaged. Her expression changed from beaming with joy to gradually being disappointed in me. She had given me a chance but I didn't cherish it. I ruined my own happiness for another woman. When I got home, my father asked me how long I could stay at the branch company. I said permanently. Looking at the smiling face on my phone's screensaver, I made my own choice. On the day of departure, I received a message from my doctor friend. He said that Lily had self-harmed again. To force me to go back to her side. She was getting more and more crazy. I thought that if I hadn't been indecisive back then, she might have given up long ago and the ending of the three of us wouldn't have been like this. The boarding announcement came from the radio. The moment I stepped onto the plane, I looked back deeply. I realized that I had made the wrong choice. I had already completely lost Tracy. The end. Jason, who had been in a coma for many years, woke up. He thought that I still liked him, but he didn't know that I was already married. At the class reunion, as a punishment for losing the game, one had to kiss someone. Jason looked at me with confidence, but in the next second, I kissed the cheek of the person beside me and shouted, "Honey." Jason woke up on a rainy day. However, the 3 years of being in a coma didn't bring any changes to him. His temper was still the same as before. Holding the meal that his aunt had specially made for him in my hand, I couldn't help but sigh. His aunt had been kind to me, and I couldn't refuse the request to take care of Jason. As soon as I pushed open the door of the ward where Jason was, his sharp eyes immediately looked towards me. "Are you awake?" I ignored Jason's gaze and sat beside him on my own. Then I put the insulated lunchbox on the table beside me. "Aunt made your favorite dishes. Do you want to eat now? Why are you here? Where's my mom?" "Aunt has been too tired these 2 days and is resting." I looked at Jason with a pale face and asked again, "Do you want to eat? I can feed you." As soon as I said this, Jason immediately lost his composure. He gritted his teeth and said, "No, I'm not hungry." Well, it was probably harder for him to let the person he hated the most feed him than to kill him. I blinked my eyes. I had expected Jason would say so I started playing with my mobile phone, not caring about what kind of expression or state of mind Jason had. "Hey, are you here to take care of me or to play with your phone?" I turned my head to look at Jason and saw that he was looking at me angrily. It seemed that he was so angry that the corners of his eyes were a bit red. If he hadn't been unable to move around vigorously now, I thought he would surely knock my phone out of my hand and ridicule me. Just as I was about to say something, I heard his stomach growling. However, Jason tightly closed his eyes and turned his head away, unwilling to look at me again. Losing face in front of me was too painful for him. "Let's eat. It won't taste good when it gets cold," I said slowly. Jason still seemed a bit reluctant, but when I brought the food to his mouth, he finally ate it. Looking at his look of bearing humiliation made me almost laugh out loud. After eating, Jason stopped me. His black eyes reflected my figure, and he smiled slyly. "You must have really hoped that I wouldn't wake up." The oversized hospital gown was put on his thin and pale body. I looked at him seriously. "I really hoped that you would wake up. Aunt and Uncle miss you very much." Jason opened his lips slightly and stared at me blankly. It seemed that he wanted to say something, but finally, he suddenly turned his cheek away. I had liked Jason, and I had also hated him. I met Jason when I was in junior high school. It was during a math competition. The moment he walked in, I noticed him. There was always a bright smile on his face, which was so out of place in the solemn and anxious surrounding environment. At that time, I didn't understand what liking was. After that day, I was always looking for his figure in the crowd. It wasn't until the math competition ended and I returned to my own school that I suppressed the thought of wanting to see him. I thought that I wouldn't see Jason again, but fate was always so capricious. My father and Jason's mother got together. However, in the third year, my father suddenly fell ill and passed away. I thought that I would become an orphan, but Jason's mother didn't drive me away. She even took me in. In the fourth year, Jason's mother remarried his father, and I went with them and saw him again. I was very happy to see Jason again, but Jason was different from me. The happier I was, the more he hated me. He thought that my father had seduced his mother, which led to the breakdown of his family. But I still fell in love with him when he occasionally showed his tenderness, such as when he fought for me and put medicine on my wounds. And my liking for him was shattered by his repeated taunts after he knew that I liked him. He said, "You're as shameless as your father and make people feel disgusted." At that time, I hated him. But those were all things in the past. For 3 whole years, I watched Jason lying on that hospital bed full of the smell of disinfectant. My hatred faded away every day, especially when I saw that Aunt's black hair gradually turned white. When I walked out of the hospital with the insulated lunchbox in my hand, I saw Ryan standing there waiting for me. The orange-yellow sunset fell behind him, casting a glow on him. When he saw me, he waved at me. I quickly ran towards him and threw myself into his arms. "Why are you here?" I asked. Ryan raised his hand and rubbed my long hair. His brown eyes darkened a little. "Don't you want me to come?" I smiled at him. "Are you jealous?" "Yes." "Oh." I kissed Ryan's chin. "I love you the most." Perhaps it wasn't that I didn't hate Jason anymore, but that I really didn't like him anymore and had let go, and this was the first year of my secret marriage with Ryan. Not long after waking up, Jason's temper became even worse because he couldn't move his hands and feet vigorously. Especially when I took care of him, when I covered him with a quilt or fed him. His world-weary mood reached its peak. One noon, because the instructor asked me some questions, I arrived at the hospital half an hour later than usual. Jason immediately expressed his dissatisfaction. "You're late." Jason spat out these words stiffly. I looked around. There was neither a clock in the ward nor could Jason play with his mobile phone. How did he know that I was late? Something held me up. I thought for a while and explained. However, Jason was very dissatisfied with this explanation. He looked at me angrily. When I took out the lunchbox, he suddenly raised his hand and knocked it over without warning. This insulated lunchbox really kept the food warm. The soup of the dishes wasn't cold at all, and the back of my hand immediately turned red. I didn't even look at Jason. I just calmly took out a tissue and wiped the back of my hand. I originally wanted to just leave and not care about Jason's life or death. But when I saw Jason's trembling hand, my heart suddenly softened. For Jason, a living person suddenly couldn't move. No one could accept it, and he must be feeling anxious and painful in his heart. I raised my head to look at Jason and saw that he was staring at my red hand. He blinked his eyes and met my gaze. Soon he turned his head away again. I gently let out a sigh. Why didn't you agree to the rehabilitation that Aunt told you about last time? Jason didn't say anything, but his eyelashes were shaking rather violently. I seized the opportunity and said, if you don't want to do rehabilitation, don't you want me to keep feeding you forever? Of course not. Don't flatter yourself. Jason suddenly turned his head to look at me and eagerly clarified that he also seemed to think that he was too eager and there was a bit of being angry and ashamed in it. So he raised his eyebrows and said his trump card from high school with a proud tone, Ivy, my mom doesn't know yet that the person she took in out of pity secretly likes her son. Don't worry. As long as you're obedient, I won't tell her. Jason's words reached my ears. I gently shook my head. 3 years really hadn't changed Jason at all, but he probably didn't know that I was no longer the girl who could be at his mercy when I was 17. Jason was still stuck in his 18th year. I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Thank you for not telling her, I said expressionlessly. I brought the food to Jason's mouth again. Jason looked at me, seeming dissatisfied with my attitude. He said in a low voice, when I can move, you'll be in trouble. What? Jason didn't say anything else and ate the food with difficulty. Anyone who didn't know would think that I was feeding him poison. That night, I received a call from Aunt. She happily said on the phone that Jason had agreed to do rehabilitation. But as she talked, she started crying again. 3 years, more than 1,000 days and nights. No one knew how she had persisted through it. That night, Ryan noticed the burn marks on the back of my hand. He didn't ask me how it happened. Instead, he held my hand in his hand with heartache and blew on my injured skin for a while. Looking at Ryan's serious look as he lowered his head, my heart was filled with boundless sweetness. I don't feel pain. I took his arm and said sweetly. However, Ryan didn't respond to what I said. He avoided my gaze and asked, what would you like to eat tonight? I knew that Ryan was a bit angry. I curled my lips and put my fingers around his neck. I'll like whatever you cook. Don't be unhappy. I'll try not to see Jason after he recovers. Only then did Ryan raise his eyes to look at me. He let out a satisfied hum from his throat and in the next second, he kissed my lips. The rosy sunset poured into the room through the French windows and fell in front of Ryan and me. My cheeks and ear tips were redder than the sunset. I leaned against his arms and listened to his intense heartbeat. Jason had been very active in rehabilitation recently, and of course, it had been quite effective. His 2 arms could already do some simple movements. Eating and picking up things were no longer a problem for him. It was just that his legs were still in the rehabilitation stage. If he wanted to go out, he could only rely on a wheelchair. I still remember the day when I went to deliver food. Jason picked up the chopsticks almost triumphantly. While eating, he kept glancing at me with his eyes. Seeing that I didn't react, he got angry all by himself again. I thought it was really good that his arms had recovered. However, the nightmare came later. After he could use his mobile phone, he sent me messages every day. Your phone is ringing. Ryan, who accompanied me to class, nudged my arm. I picked up my phone and subconsciously checked it. Sure enough, it was from Jason, sweet and sour pork ribs, don't buy them ready-made. It was such a simple sentence, but it was really in line with Jason's character. I didn't even bother to roll my eyes. Ryan suddenly laughed. I turned my head to look at him and saw that he raised his hands. There was unconcealable laughter in his voice. Sorry, I didn't mean to look at your phone. Why is he so boring? Alas. I gently shook my head. In the evening, Ryan cooked sweet and sour pork ribs. He handed me the packed insulated lunchbox. When I held it in my hand, I felt really sorry for Ryan. Ryan saw through what I was thinking at a glance. He hugged me tightly in his arms, and his voice rang in my ear, I'm not that magnanimous, but I don't want to make it difficult for you. Ryan's words entered my heart along my ear, and my chest felt so hot as if it was on fire. Thank you. Ryan, however, smiled and said, then should I get some reward? I looked at him in confusion and then I saw him gently tap his cheeks twice. Jason was very dissatisfied with this plate of sweet and sour spare ribs. He either complained that the meat was too tough or that it was too sweet. He picked a lot of faults, but that didn't stop him from eating up the whole plate. Satisfied, he leaned against the bed and ordered me to push him out for a stroll, saying that he wanted to go out and enjoy the moonlight tonight. I directly refused his request with a blank expression. Jason immediately got angry, as if he couldn't believe that I would reject him. It's a bit chilly outside. Aren't you afraid of catching a cold? I explained. Mainly because if he caught a cold, Auntie and Uncle would have to take care of him again, and I didn't want Auntie to worry anymore. However, what I said sounded different to Jason's ears. He sneered and said, "Do you feel sorry for me?" I was stunned on the spot. Fortunately, Jason didn't want to hear my answer either. He looked at me sharply and said again, "I heard from my mom that you're studying at a local university. Back then, didn't you say you wanted to go to a university far away? Why didn't you go?" I admired Jason. I wrote that sentence in my notebook during high school. More than 3 years had passed, and Jason still remembered it. "I just didn't want to go anymore," I replied casually. I picked up my mobile phone and took a look at the time. Ryan would come to the hospital to pick me up soon. Jason didn't believe what I said. He sat up straight with his arms crossed in front of his chest. Obviously, he was looking up at me, but he made it seem like he was looking down on me. He said, "Whatever the reason is, I'm sure that I definitely won't." Suddenly, Jason stopped talking. He lowered his head and frowned tightly, as if he was struggling with the unfinished words. It was 8 o'clock in the evening. I picked up the thermos lunchbox and walked out of the ward. As expected, Ryan was waiting there. My heart, which had been as calm as still water, immediately stirred up waves. Now I just hoped that Jason would recover quickly and be able to walk on the ground as usual. Of course, this was also what Auntie and Uncle hoped for the most. So none of us dared to make Jason angry, for fear that he would lose his temper and stop the rehabilitation in the next second. For me, the main reason was that Auntie had been kind to me. She provided me with food and paid for my schooling. I had no way to repay her. So whenever Jason sent me messages and made requests, I would mostly satisfy him. When Jason wanted to eat something, Ryan would cook for him. But every time after cooking, Ryan would ask me for some rewards. I also felt sorry for Ryan when I saw him cooking for Jason. Once I said that I would do the cooking in the future, but Ryan directly refused me. "No way. I haven't even let my wife cook, and he doesn't deserve to eat the food you cooked." I hugged Ryan's waist from behind, and my heart felt as if it was soaked in warm water. "Why are you so nice?" "I'm not that nice. It's you who are nice," Ryan said seriously. When the summer vacation arrived, Jason's leg had almost recovered. On the day he was discharged from the hospital, I arrived at the hospital at noon. But as soon as I walked out of the elevator, someone called me, "Sister Mang." I subconsciously turned around and saw the little girl I met when I pushed Jason downstairs for a walk that day. The little girl smiled shyly at me, tightly clutching the chocolate in her hand. "What's the matter? Is there anything wrong?" The little girl pushed the wheelchair and moved closer to me. It seemed that she had made a great determination before handing the chocolate to me. "Sister Mang, could you help me give this chocolate to brother Jason? I may never see him again." I immediately understood the little girl's thoughts and I felt a bit mixed emotions in my heart. Jason just happened to meet her and talked to her a few times, showing his humorous side, and then deeply attracted her. But she didn't know that it was all Jason's disguise. In fact, Jason was cold and arrogant. I couldn't refuse her, so I reached out and took it. "Okay." As soon as I walked into the ward, Jason saw the chocolate in my hand at a glance. He glanced at me and snorted coldly, "I don't like this brand of chocolate." I calmly put the chocolate on Jason's lap. "Do you still remember the little girl in a wheelchair we met downstairs that day? She asked me to give it to you." Jason immediately frowned slightly and thought about this person in his mind. Soon he suddenly realized, "You haven't changed at all when it comes to liking to deliver things for others." Jason raised his eyes, and his tone was full of ridicule. I knew what he was referring to, because during high school, many girls asked me to deliver love letters to Jason. The dazzling sunlight shone on Jason's cheeks. His long eyelashes were like a butterfly about to take flight, and his slightly long hair covered his cold eyes. As usual, he raised his hand and threw the chocolate into the trash can under the bed. Perhaps those gifts full of love were just unrecyclable garbage to him. This time, Auntie and Uncle also pushed the door open and came in, saying that everything was ready and they could leave now. Jason nodded, calmly lifted the quilt, stood up, and walked out. He walked out of the place where he had been confined for 3 years. After Jason went home to live, in order to reduce the chances of meeting him, I seldom went back. But this didn't stop Jason from causing trouble for me at all. On Saturday, Auntie asked me to go home early, saying that the 4 of us would have a reunion dinner. I couldn't refuse, so I had to go back. To avoid seeing Jason, I immediately walked into my bedroom after I got back. However, soon someone knocked on my door. I thought it was Auntie, but when I opened the door, I saw Jason standing outside. He was still holding a lot of clothes in his hands. He raised his eyebrows at me. "Here are these dirty clothes for you." I remained silent and didn't move. Jason seemed a bit impatient. He forcefully tried to stuff those clothes into my arms. I deliberately stepped back, and the clothes immediately scattered all over the floor. This time it was my turn to raise my eyebrows. I folded my arms in front of my chest. "Wash your own clothes? Don't you have hands?" Jason couldn't believe that these were the words coming out of my mouth. He frowned tightly and was about to speak when I interrupted directly. "Are you going to threaten me again, saying that you'll tell Auntie that I like you?" "Go ahead and tell her." After saying this, I slammed the door hard and didn't look at Jason's expression. During high school, Jason used this sentence to threaten me, making me wash his clothes, run errands for him, do his homework for him, and even accompany him when he was punished to run laps. The door was knocked on again. It was Auntie's voice, asking me to come out for dinner. When I was sitting on the stool, I took a look at Jason across the table. It seemed that he hadn't told Auntie about that matter. Jason seemed to sense my gaze. He raised his head and silently said to me, "Just you wait." Auntie hired a tutor for Jason, thinking that he could retake the college entrance examination and enter a university he liked. I thought this would make Jason calm down for a couple of days, but I really underestimated him. Ryan's birthday was coming soon. After thinking about it, I decided to give Ryan a bottle of perfume, hoping that every time he smelled this fragrance, he would think of me. So I immediately placed an order excitedly. I originally wanted to have it mailed directly to Ryan's home, but I was afraid that Ryan would find out and there would be no sense of mystery. So I chose Auntie's home as the address. I was looking forward to the arrival of the gift day and night. I had even thought about what packaging to use and what to say when I gave it to Ryan. However, I never expected that my courier would be picked up by someone else. When I received the message that the item had been picked up, I was shocked and immediately called the courier station. The person on the other end of the phone told me that the person got my mobile phone number suffix right and also said my name correctly, so they couldn't stop that person from taking it away. My mind was racing, and I felt a bit uneasy. I asked, "What does that person look like?" Based on the courier's description, I became more and more certain that the person who took my courier was Jason. I immediately called Jason, but no one answered the phone all the time. I pounded the bed hard and then resigned myself to getting up and changing clothes. I knocked on Jason's door for about a minute before he slowly opened the door. He leaned casually against the side of the doorway and said slowly, "What's the matter? Where's my courier? Give it back to me." I said directly, "Are you talking about this? It smells quite nice." Jason took out the bottle of perfume I bought from behind as if by magic. The packaging had already been opened by Jason. He looked at me with interest, playing with the bottle of perfume in his hand, and said even more maliciously, "If you beg me, maybe I'll give it back to you." At this moment, many things came to my mind. and all the past scenes flashed through my head that I knew that if I got angry at this moment, I would fall into Jason's trap. So I took a step back and looked at him as if he were a madman. Jason, you're so childish. After saying this, I plan to leave. Just as I turned around, Jason suddenly grabbed my wrist. Who are you calling childish? I coldly turned my head back. Let go. Jason pursed his lips tightly, and the fingers gripping my wrist tightened even more. It wasn't until Auntie's voice came from the living room that Jason seemed to wake up from a dream and let go of my hand. Then his gaze fell on my slightly red wrist, and confusion appeared in his eyes. I didn't see Jason for several days after that day. I didn't know what he was doing in the room every day. I didn't plan to get that bottle of perfume back. So I bought a pair of sneakers for Ryan as a birthday gift. But one day when I opened the door, I found that the bottle of perfume was placed right in front of my door, and Jason had even stuck a sticker on it. I pulled it off and took a look. There were actually words of apology written on it. I'm sorry. I was wrong that day. I couldn't believe it. Then I realized that this might be another trick of Jason's. I threw the note and the perfume into the trash can together and turned around and left without looking back. However, Jason became kind-hearted. In the evening, because I was thirsty, I went to the living room to pour some water. In a daze, I heard the sound of a game console being played. I turned my head and saw Jason sitting on the sofa playing games. He seemed to sense my footsteps. He immediately turned down the volume and turned his head to look at me. Did I wake you up? I'll stop playing after this round. I shook my head and then lowered my head to pour water. No. Until I finished drinking the water, Jason's gaze was still on me. I frowned slightly. Is there anything else? Jason seemed a bit embarrassed and lowered his head. He threw the game controller on the coffee table and immediately stood up. Wait for me for a moment. I felt puzzled. Soon Jason walked out of his bedroom, carrying a small box in his hand. Here you are. When I saw the logo on the box clearly, I immediately understood that it turned out that Jason had bought another one and returned it to me. I don't need it. I refused. Jason didn't allow me to refuse and stuffed it into my hand. The slightly cool fingertips touching me made me want to step back. I was wrong that day. Don't be angry anymore. After saying this, Jason lowered his eyes, and his expression was a bit unnatural as he said, It's getting late. I'm going to bed. Good night. Then left in a flustered manner. I looked at the box in my hand and felt as if I were in a dream. Sunday was Ryan's birthday, so he started asking me since Saturday whether I had any plans for Sunday and if I wanted to go out and play together. I knew what he meant, but since I wanted to give him a surprise, I said I didn't have time. Ryan's breath paused for a second on the other end of the phone. Soon, he pretended to be relaxed and said, It doesn't matter. Hearing him say that, my heart instantly twisted into a knot, and I couldn't wait to fly back and throw myself into his arms right away. After hanging up the phone, I began to wait for time to pass. I wanted to be the first one to celebrate Ryan's birthday. When it was 10 o'clock in the evening, I went to the cake shop to pick up the cake. After taking a stroll outside, I took a taxi to Ryan's home. When it was 23:50, I knocked on the door. Although I was the one preparing the surprise, my heart was beating unusually fast, as if it was going to jump out of my chest in the next second. The door was quickly opened. When Ryan found it was me, his eyes were instantly filled with shock and joy. Happy birthday. I threw myself into Ryan's arms, and he also hugged me tightly at the same time. At this moment, I seemed to hear his heartbeat as well. We turned off the lights, leaving only a few candles on the cake. Ryan's body blended into the surrounding darkness, and only a faint light shone on his cheeks. He clasped his fingers together and made a wish seriously, and his long eyelashes cast shadows on the wall. All right. Ryan blew out the candle seriously. What wish did you make? I teased. Ryan looked up at me and said mysteriously, I'll tell you when we're both 100 years old. Can we live to be 100 years old? Of course. Ryan lovingly took my fingers and intertwined them with his. We'll not only have 100 years but also 200 years, in the next life and the life after that. Jason's change was unbelievable to me. At first, I thought it was a new trick he had come up with. However, a whole month had passed, and Jason was still like this, which made me wonder if Jason had finally understood that bullying others was actually the most childish behavior and was essentially to fill the distorted void in his heart. On this day, Auntie called me and asked me to go back, saying that she had something to tell Jason and me. When I got back, she had just finished cooking the meal. To my shock, all the dishes on the table were my favorites. I was a bit surprised, but Auntie smiled and said, "Jason ordered all these dishes. If you like something to eat, just tell me, and I'll cook it for you." I quickly shook my head. "These are fine. I like all the dishes Auntie cooks." "How sweet talking you are." A smile bloomed on Auntie's face. I really hadn't seen her smile for a long time, and I was a bit dazed, as if I had gone back to the past. I shifted my gaze to Jason's face, wondering in my heart how he knew what I liked to eat. Jason noticed my gaze. Instead of dodging it, he raised his hand and smiled at me, with the corners of his mouth slightly turning up, showing a standard set of 8 teeth. His cold eyes began to melt with that smile. At the dinner table, Auntie told the truth that she and Uncle were going out to do something this Sunday and wouldn't be back until Monday. I nodded, indicating that it was okay. I was so focused that I didn't notice the sly look that flashed in Jason's eyes. On Saturday, Jason began to intentionally or unintentionally tell me that he was going to watch a movie on Sunday, and after that, he might also go shopping in the mall. He also said that he had been lying in bed for 3 years and didn't know if anything had changed. At that time, I didn't think much of it and just calmly nodded and even recommended 2 interesting places to him. By the way, it started raining on Saturday night. The pattering raindrops hit the windows and made a slight sound. When I got up in the morning, the rain still hadn't stopped. I pushed open the window and let the raindrops fall in. The whole sky was gray, making it impossible to see into the distance. I received Jason's call at noon. His rapid breathing, accompanied by the sound of raindrops hitting the ground, came into my ears. "Ivy, Before I could say anything, the call was hung up directly on the other end. I suddenly sat up halfway and fear kept spreading from my heart. I felt my hands and feet starting to go numb. I dialed back again and again, but no one answered all the time. At this moment, I thought of Jason covered in blood in high school. He was pushed into the emergency room with a pale face. I remembered Auntie fainting because she couldn't accept it, and I remembered Uncle pacing back and forth constantly. I almost tremblingly found a piece of clothing to put on and then rushed downstairs. I searched all the movie theaters and described to the staff whether they had seen a boy over 1.8 meters tall, wearing a black short-sleeved shirt and shorts, with a necklace around his neck. I repeated it over and over again, but every staff member told me that they hadn't seen him. I thought maybe Jason had already finished watching the movie and was now in the mall. The clothes on my body were already wet. I couldn't tell whether it was rain or tears on my face. I ran like a madman on the street. I searched again and again in the mall but still couldn't find him. I stood there in a daze, with my mind blank. The cool wind blew into my body, and I shivered violently. I planned to go home and take one last look. If I really couldn't find him, I could only call Auntie and Uncle and then call the police. I absent-mindedly opened the door of my home and saw Jason sitting on the sofa, with kebabs and beer placed on the coffee table. Jason looked me up and down, looking at me in such a drenched state. Soon, Jason raised his eyebrows, and sarcastic words came out of his mouth. "How did you get into such a mess?" I instantly understood everything. The kindness of the past month was all an illusion. He had been waiting for this day, waiting for a complete revenge. My body couldn't help shivering continuously. The rainwater flowed down my trouser legs and left water marks on the floor. I had underestimated Jason and his nastiness. Jason sneered. He slowly stood up and walked slowly towards me, slightly bending down to look me in the eye. "Fight with me." I looked at him silently and suddenly raised my hand and slapped him, interrupting his unfinished words. Jason turned his head aside. After a while, he pushed his tongue against the left cheek that had been slapped, and then unceremoniously grabbed my arm and dragged me towards the sofa. "How dare you hit me? Has the heavy rain made you stupid?" My struggle was insignificant to Jason. He pinned me on the sofa, firmly pressed my shoulders to prevent me from getting up, and crazily demanded that I apologize to him. "Jason, I hate you." After saying this, I couldn't stop my tears from flowing down. Before, I said I liked Jason and then said I hated him. Now, I really dislike him, loathe him. I've never denied my affection for him when I was young, but now whenever I think that I once liked him, I feel extremely disgusted that he finally ruined the Jason in junior high school and the affection I had when I first fell in love. Jason's body froze instantly when he saw my tears. He suddenly let go of the hand that was pressing on me, stood up at a loss, and almost ran out of the living room. I tremblingly picked up my phone and called Ryan. I didn't want to stay here for another second. After leaving, I had a high fever. Ryan took care of me without taking off his clothes for 3 whole days. During that time, I also woke up in a daze and saw Ryan looking at me with heartache. I grasped his fingers and put them beside my cheek. Fortunately, he was by my side. At noon on the 4th day, I finally got rid of the fever, and Ryan, who had been worried all the time, finally felt relieved. Ryan didn't ask me anything else but just hugged me tightly in his arms. "Don't make me worry about you like this again next time. If there's another time." I quickly patted his back to comfort him and then began to swear, "Don't worry. I promise there won't be a next time." Ryan snorted softly, indicating his satisfaction. "I'll get you some porridge." On the 5th day, I received a message from Jason. "Mom said she misses you and asks you to come back for dinner." I ignored it because when Andy asked me to go home for dinner, she always called me directly instead of asking Jason to convey the message. A few days before the end of the summer vacation, both Ryan and I received messages from the high school class monitor, hoping that we could attend the class reunion. He also said that it would be impolite of us not to come, so we were too embarrassed to decline and agreed. The time was set at 6 o'clock this Sunday evening. Ryan and I arrived at the address sent by the class monitor a few minutes early. When the waiter opened the door, we found that quite a few classmates had already arrived. The class monitor saw us and immediately came over to greet us with some pleasantries. Ryan and I had just found an empty seat and sat down when the door of the private room was pushed open again. I didn't pay attention until a shadow fell in front of me, and then I subconsciously looked up. It was Jason. I frowned almost imperceptibly. I didn't expect Jason to come. But then again, Jason was also a high school classmate. Since he was awake, the class monitor would surely have informed him. "All right, everyone's here," the class monitor said in a louder voice. "The dishes will still take a while to be ready. Since we're just waiting, how about we play some games and have some drinks first?" Everyone agreed in unison. And so, the game began. We were playing the game of knocking out sevens. The person who was called out could choose to drink or take a dare. I don't know if it was because of my bad cold last time, but when it was my turn, I either called out the wrong number or knocked at the wrong time. "Come on, choose to drink or take a dare." Looking at the excited gazes around me, my tongue moved faster than my brain. "Take a dare." Then, kiss someone in the private room. As soon as the class monitor said this, Jason glanced at him, and then he tapped his finger twice on the wine glass in front of him. When he looked at me, there was a look of certainty in his eyes. I turned my head to look at Ryan and saw him looking at me with a smile, and the tiny lights above his head fell into his eyes, which deeply attracted me. I quickly kissed him on the cheek and subconsciously shouted, "Husband." Ryan lovingly raised his hand and rubbed the hair on top of my head and said generously, "Sorry, my wife doesn't drink well and is a bit drunk." Ryan actually said that I didn't drink well. I snorted softly, "No, I'm not." The monitor came over at the right moment, looking at me and Ryan again and again with his eyes. We're married." Immediately there were sounds of surprise and sighs all around. Ryan hugged me into his arms and said to the monitor, "Sorry, monitor. We won't have dinner today. I'm worried that she'll have a stomachache later. We'll leave now." Okay, no problem." The monitor quickly waved his hand. Ryan put his arm around me and stood up. My sight just happened to fall on Jason, who was opposite. He was staring at me fixedly, and the veins on the hand holding the wine glass bulged as if he was going to overturn the table in the next second. "Wait. Jason slowly stood up and looked at Ryan sharply. You said you're married. As a member of Ivy's family, how come I didn't know about it? Ryan curled his lips and smiled slightly with no waves in his eyes. This matter is still in the confidential stage for the time being. If you want to see the marriage certificate, you can do so at any time. But please, little brother-in-law, keep this secret for us first. Jason's face turned from red to white and then to blue. Those who didn't know might think that he was performing a face-changing show. Ryan put his arm around my shoulder and walked outside. The fresh air was breathed into my lungs, but I felt even dizzier. Look, the moon tonight is so beautiful. But it's not as beautiful as you. Ryan lowered his head and kissed my eyes. I closed my eyes tremblingly. Since the class reunion, Jason hadn't contacted me for a month. Even when I was called back by Aunt to have a meal, I didn't see Jason. Of course, I wouldn't take the initiative to ask about him. I couldn't wait for him to stay away from me. However, I was wrong. I don't know how he found out where I had classes. The next time I saw Jason was downstairs in the teaching building. He was looking at me from a distance, and the wind blew the hem of his white t-shirt flying. I originally wanted to pretend that I didn't see him and walk around him to leave, but he shouted my name regardless and ran over to block in front of me. What's the matter? I asked in confusion. Jason didn't answer my question. Instead, he smiled and spoke. His voice fell into my ears along with the wind, carrying a sense of forced laughter. I seem to have had a dream. I dreamed that you got married. It's so funny, isn't it? How could you be married? You're only a senior this year. It's true. I interrupted Jason's self-deception. I'm really married, Jason. Jason's smile shattered at this moment, and the slightly raised corners of his mouth began to freeze. Jason moved closer to me. He slightly lowered his head and looked into my eyes, pulling out a bitter smile. I know you're still angry because I lied to you that day. I'm apologizing to you now, but please don't say such angry words. I slightly frowned. Why couldn't Jason understand what I said after not seeing him for a month? Think whatever you like. I didn't plan to get entangled with him anymore and was about to leave by walking around him. However, Jason kept following me relentlessly. He just followed me silently without saying anything. Finally, I couldn't bear it anymore and suddenly turned around to look at him. My voice couldn't help but become high-pitched. What on earth do you want? Don't follow me. At this moment, I clearly saw that Jason's eyes were red. Ivy, I've thought a lot in this month. I thought of the first time I met you, the 2 years when I bullied you, and the 3 years when I was in a coma. So many scenes and emotions surrounded me. Finally, all the scenes were fixed on the day of the class reunion. I thought of all the birthday gifts you gave me that were actually stored in the cabinet. I thought of a lot of things. I think I like you. Jason's words falling into my ears were no less shocking than being told that the end of the world was coming. I was extremely shocked. Jason suddenly smiled. Ivy, don't you like me? I also like you. Would you like to be with me? I will definitely be good to you. I will make up for all the past. The gentle breeze blew through my hair. I let out a soft sigh. Jason, whether you like me or not, we can't be together because I don't like you anymore. Besides, I'm already married. But, you used to say that you liked me very much. You also said that was in the past. Now I love my husband very much. After saying this, I turned around and walked forward without looking at Jason's gradually shattered expression behind me. I thought that Jason wouldn't come to pester me after that day. Indeed, he didn't pester me but went to find Ryan instead. When Ryan received the call from Jason, he was lying in bed with me, being affectionate. Jason asked you to go downstairs? I asked. Ryan put on his clothes while comforting me. Don't worry. I can handle it. Don't worry. I stood up and pulled aside a corner of the curtain. I saw Jason at a glance. He was pacing back and forth on the spot, seeming a bit anxious. Stay upstairs properly. Ryan lowered his head and kissed my hair, then waved at me when he reached the door. After watching Ryan leave, I just couldn't calm down in my heart. Finally, I also put on a piece of clothing and went downstairs. I hid at the entrance of the staircase and watched Ryan and Jason, thinking that if something happened, I would rush out immediately. The two of them didn't know what they said. Suddenly, Jason punched Ryan, and Ryan also began to fight back without showing any weakness. I looked at this scene in astonishment. After coming to my senses, I quickly ran out. When I got closer, I heard what Jason said clearly: "You're despicable. If I hadn't been in a coma for 3 years, would Ivy be with you? I thought you had ulterior motives back in high school. I should have killed you at that time." Ryan pinned Jason under him and punched him in the face, interrupting his unfinished words: "Losing Ivy is your fate. If you don't cherish her, there are plenty of people who will. You deserve it. Spend the rest of your life regretting it." I rushed to Ryan's side and stopped his arm in a flustered manner. "Stop it, stop it. If you break something, you'll have to pay for it." After hearing my voice, Ryan stopped his hand. He slowly loosened his hand that was grabbing Jason's collar, stood up, and looked at Jason lying on the ground indifferently. Jason's cheek was already bruised, and there was some blood faintly flowing from the corner of his mouth. He staggered to his feet and his eyes fell on me. "Ivy, if you say you don't like me anymore, then why did you take care of me when I was in the hospital and cook for me?" There was hope in Jason's eyes. "Taking care of you was what Aunt asked Ivy to do. And the meals you ate in those days were all cooked by me." Ryan calmly answered Jason's question. Jason almost took 2 steps back tremblingly. He looked at me sadly. "Is it true?" I nodded. "Yes, it's true." Ryan took my hand. "Why did you come down wearing so little? What if you catch a cold? Let's go upstairs now." "Okay." I intertwined my fingers with Ryan's and passed by Jason, walking upstairs step by step. "He said that you had ulterior motives since high school. Did you like me since the first year of high school?" I asked. Ryan said instead, "Do you still remember the first time you talked to me? At that time, you said, 'Hi, Ryan. The teacher is going to collect the notes.' I'll never forget that scene. Love always comes into being inadvertently. Perhaps it's on a windless morning or a leisurely afternoon." After this incident, I decided to tell Aunt and Uncle about my marriage with Ryan. On Friday, I deliberately called Aunt and told them that I was married and that I had obtained the marriage certificate for over a year. Aunt was very shocked on the other end of the phone. Then she immediately asked me to bring Ryan back this Sunday for them to meet. I immediately agreed. On Sunday, Ryan was especially nervous. He changed his clothes 4 or 5 times, either feeling that they weren't fresh enough or that they weren't solemn enough. Then he began to worry whether the gifts he bought were enough and whether Aunt and Uncle would like them. Seeing his nervous look, I couldn't help laughing. When we drove home, it was just noon. Aunt had just finished cooking. Aunt and Uncle looked Ryan up and down, seeming quite satisfied with his appearance. "Just come. Why did you bring gifts?" Ryan sat on the sofa. During this period, Aunt and Uncle asked a lot of questions about Ryan's family and his current situation, and he answered them all smoothly. Aunt nodded with satisfaction and gave me a wink. "Okay, let's have dinner." When we sat on the chairs, Jason just walked out of the bedroom. The bruises on his cheeks hadn't faded yet. When his eyes fell on me and Ryan, he seemed a bit shocked. "Why are you here?" Aunt quickly said, "You haven't gone out of the room these 2 days. I didn't even have time to tell you. Today, Ivy and her boyfriend came over for dinner. Do you know each other?" Jason sneered. "Yes, of course I know him. He's my high school classmate." Aunt's face immediately lit up with a smile. "High school classmate? That's great. We know each other well." Jason sat down casually on the chair on the other side, looking at me and Ryan sharply. Ryan held my hand tightly under the table. Aunt was still saying, "Then when do you plan to hold the wedding? Your uncle and I are looking forward to that day." "Aunt, do you agree?" I said excitedly. There was nothing happier than getting the support of my family. This sentence seemed to irritate Jason. Before Aunt could say anything, Jason suddenly stood up, with the veins on his hands bulging. "Mom may agree but I don't." Then he overturned the food on the table to the ground. Aunt exclaimed instantly, "Jason, are you crazy?" "Yes, I'm crazy, Mom. I like Ivy." I couldn't help but widen my eyes, feeling incredible. The carefully maintained harmonious family scene finally broke down. Ryan hugged me tightly in his arms, but I still saw Uncle give Jason a slap and scold, "Bastard." This meeting was spent in chaos. I whispered an apology to Ryan, but Ryan covered my lips. "It's not your fault at all. Don't blame yourself." I nodded vigorously, but my throat began to feel sour. I thought that I must have saved Ryan in my previous life to meet him in this life. The only good thing was that the application for studying abroad that Ryan and I submitted in our junior year was approved. We could fly to Australia to study in a while. During this period, Aunt called me again. She apologized for Jason and also asked me when we would hold the wedding. I thought about it and told her the news that we were going to Australia. "That's good. I think Ryan is a reliable kid. Don't forget to let us know that you're safe when you get there." I smiled, "No problem." Before I knew it, late autumn had arrived. The withered and yellow leaves fell to the ground, making a crunching sound when stepped on. During this period, Jason sent me a lot of messages. In the end, I blocked him. He also tried to find me at school, but since I deliberately avoided him, we never met. The last time I saw him was 2 days before I was about to go abroad. He seemed to be rather dispirited. He wore a white shirt casually, and his hair had grown a bit longer, slightly covering his eyes. He hung his head low, and I didn't know what he was thinking. I ignored him and chose to take a detour to leave. On the day I went abroad, when I was at the airport, I received a call from an unknown number. The person on the other end of the phone didn't speak immediately, but I still knew it was Jason. After a long while, he finally said, "I always made you beg me before. Now, can I beg you? Please don't leave." I turned my head to look at Ryan. My figure was reflected in his clear eyes, and all I could see in them was me. "Take good care of Auntie and Uncle and live a good life." After saying that, I hung up the phone and clenched Ryan's fingers slightly. Ryan then took the opportunity to embrace me in his arms. "I love you." "Huh?" I shyly raised my eyes. "Why are you being so mushy today?" Ryan grinned and raised his eyebrows playfully. "Don't you like it?" "Yes, I do." I paused for a moment and then added, "I love you too." We boarded the plane together and headed for the next destination of happiness, the end.